Julius, an old man of 60, his back now bowed like a walking stick, deeply cherished his family, especially his daughter. Despite his age, he still rose with the sun, sweeping his compound with the vigor of a young man. But one fateful morning, as he clutched his broom, a tremor began in his hand. At first it was a gentle quiver like a leaf dancing in a soft breeze. Then it worsened. His fingers lost their grip on the broom. One leg dragged, refusing to follow the other. He tried to steady himself, but the world spun. And then he collapsed, falling to the floor like a sack of wet sand, his eyes rolling back, mouth agape, utterly silent. His neighbor Mama Tossin heard the heavy thud. Julius has collapsed, she screamed, and soon a crowd gathered. His body was cold, his mouth stiff, yet a faint tremor remained in his chest. Gently they carried him like a fragile pot to the nearest clinic. The nurses, bewildered, simply shook their heads. "We don't know what's wrong. Try the general hospital." And so began a harrowing journey. From one hospital to another, from town to city, doctor after doctor. No one could diagnose his ailment. Some whispered stroke, others poison, and some even hinted at a curse. They tried local herbs, black soap, holy water, candles, and anointed oil, but Julius only worsened. His voice grew faint, his fingers too weak to lift a spoon. He couldn't turn his neck, couldn't move his legs. His eyes, tired and distant, seemed to watch for death's inevitable knock. The news of Julius's mysterious illness spread like wildfire through Asagira, a town where gossip thrived. People gathered under mango trees, by firewood stoves, and in market stalls, their lips moving like drumbeats. "This is no ordinary sickness," one woman murmured. "A man who walked yesterday now can't move today," another mused. "Perhaps he offended a spirit," someone whispered, while an old man slowly nodded, adding, "Or it's punishment for something from long ago." Even children playing in the sand pointed to his compound, calling it the cursed man's house. What began as whispers soon solidified into a grim belief. Julius could no longer walk. His legs were stiff as firewood. He couldn't sit, his back bent like a broken bench. He couldn't hold a spoon, his words scattered like wind-blown papers. His clothes were damp with urine, his wrappers smelled of feces, his mouth reeked of rotten yam. His eyes, vacant as a curtainless window, even drew flies that settled on him as if he were refuse. Visitors dwindled. Neighbors came less and less. Julius lay there quiet, still, a living statue. They had exhausted every remedy, but the sickness held him captive. And so, whispers became stories, stories turned to fear, and fear settled into a chilling silence, for everyone now believed Julius was cursed. Long before his illness, even when Julius walked with the strength of a lion, he was disregarded. He wasn't wealthy, he had no grand car, no fine clothes, no academic degrees in a town like Asagira, where education and status were paraded openly. Julius had known no school bag, no chalk. He couldn't even write his own name. When other men gathered under the meeting tree to discuss village matters, Julius would arrive early, often first, sitting quietly, awaiting his turn to speak. But when he raised his hand, they'd turn away. "Please, please," someone would dismiss him, waving a hand as if shooing a fly. "Don't waste our time." Even the town crier stopped calling Julius for events. "Call him for what?" the crier once scoffed. "He has nothing to offer. His head is for carrying baskets, not for talking." Julius became an invisible man. At weddings, people walked past him. At naming ceremonies, his cup was skipped. At burials, his opinion was never sought. He was present, yet absent. At home it was worse. His 4 wives treated him like leftovers. They cooked what they pleased, went out without asking, didn't kneel to greet him, and offered no water even when he coughed. They saw him not as a husband but as a mistake. "Why did I marry this man?" the first wife would grumble. "He's useless," the second would add. The third would hiss, "Even beggars have more sense." The fourth simply laughed, a laugh that cut like a blade. When he coughed, they'd snap, "Don't disturb the air." When he asked for food, "Go cook it yourself." And his daughters, they were another story. Beautiful like river fairies with glowing skin, polished nails, and shining clothes, but their tongues were fire. Unemployed, they relied on rich boyfriends and sugar daddies. Men in sleek cars would honk twice at night, and the girls would rush out, giggling. One day P. Julius tried to speak. "My daughters," he said, his voice trembling, "you're not living well." Before he could finish, one snapped, "Who gave you a mouth?" Another shouted, "Did you go to school? Teach yourself first." The youngest, in a short skirt and long lashes, hissed so loudly lizards scattered. P. Julius retreated, broken in his own home, a stranger like a broom by the wall, only touched when needed. As he lay on his sickbed, reeking of illness and sweat, those who should have cared spat fire. Their father was still breathing, but to them he was already dead. Love had packed its bags. Only insults remained. One morning, as the sun climbed and birds sang, P. Julius's room held no music, only a stench. He had soiled himself. Feces and urine soaked the mat, the air thick, the room smelling like an open pit toilet under a hot sun. "Take me," he stammered, but the words refused to form. His mouth twisted, his tongue heavy, his hands shook, his legs unmoving. His eyes, open but weary, blinked slowly as if life was ebbing away second by second. His daughters entered, recoiled from the mess and jumped back. "Oh, you're smelling," one cried, covering her nose. "Disgraceful old man," the second spat. "Is this how you want to die?" another laughed. "Like a baby with poo everywhere?" None brought water, none brought soap. They turned and left, slamming the door like a coffin lid. From that day they stopped cooking for him. His pot remained empty. They stopped washing his clothes. He wore the same wet, dirty, cold wrapper for days. The fan in his room ceased turning, the water bucket stayed dry, the food tray clean, not from washing but from disuse. Only a few neighbors, those with a flicker of kindness left, would knock gently. "Here," they'd whisper, offering a spoonful of rice or a small cup of pap. Sometimes he didn't eat at all. Sometimes the ants ate more than he did. The man who once stood tall, danced in the rain, and knew the love of 4 women, became a forgotten shadow. A mess on a mat, a body left alone, breathing, fading. In that same bustling town of Asagira, where voices were loud and hearts small, lived a quiet woman named Sarah. She was not rich, had no gold, no fine car, only a small sewing machine and a heart expansive enough to hold a river. Her husband had died a year after their wedding, leaving her with only memories and an empty bed. Since then Sarah walked alone, stitching clothes for others. Blouses, wrappers, school uniforms, and from this humble work she fed herself. But her heart, it refused to shrink. Every morning before the sun fully awakened, Sarah would tie her scarf, gather a bowl of water, soap and a towel and tiptoe to P. Julius's house. She didn't knock loudly, she simply slipped in. P. Julius would lie there, eyes half closed, flies dancing around his head, his wrapper soaked, his skin dry like cracked earth. Sarah would bend, lift him gently like a mother tending her sick child. She would wash him slowly, softly, carefully, clean his mess, rub balm on his skin and dress him in a fresh wrapper. Then she would offer a small plate of food. "Eat, Baba P. Julius," she would whisper, bringing the spoon to his lips. Sometimes P. Julius tried to speak, his voice trembling, tears falling, but Sarah always smiled. She would wipe his face and say, "Don't talk, just eat." Then she'd pack her things, say, "I'm going to the shop now," and walk to her sewing table. But her kindness didn't end there. At night, when stars yawned and frogs sang, Sarah would return, this time with warm food. Rice, yam or a small soup with dried fish. She'd sit beside P. Julius, feed him again, adjust his pillow and sing softly like a lullaby. P. Julius would look at her with tired eyes and whisper, "Why are you helping me?" Sarah would simply smile and say, "Because it's the right thing." Then she'd stand, quietly leave and disappear into the night. Sarah returned the next morning and the next and every single day after. People in Asagira began to notice, pointing and laughing. "Look at her," they'd sneer, "the wife of the sick man. Maybe she wants to inherit his poverty." Another would joke, "She must be mad." But Sarah never responded. She never raised her voice, she simply walked her quiet path, carried her food, cleaned his body, smiled her small smile and left. Even when insults were loud, she remained calm like still water. In a world where everyone turned away, Sarah remained a candle in deep darkness. But one hot, breezeless day, P. Julius's daughters exploded with anger. Sarah had just arrived, carrying her small bowl of hot yam porridge. She gently pushed the gate as always and stepped inside. This time, however, there was no silence. Julius's 4 daughters were waiting, their faces contorted, eyes red, arms crossed. "Who sent you?" the first one shrieked. Sarah blinked. "I just brought food." "Did anyone ask you to feed our father?" the second hissed. "Or are you planning to take him to your house?" the third said, stepping forward. Then the fourth grabbed her scarf. Before Sarah could speak, they dragged her by her wrapper, pulled her hair, slapped her face and threw her to the ground. "Don't come here again," one screamed. "Do you hear? You want to disgrace us in this town," another shouted. "Carry your pity and go." They shoved her out like old garbage. Sarah picked up her broken bowl, gathered her scarf and walked away without a word. Her cheek was red, her hand shaking, but her eyes remained calm. That night Julius waited. He turned his head repeatedly, hoping to see her shadow at the door, but no one came. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He just lay there quiet, empty. But the next morning, before the rooster's first crow, there was a soft, familiar knock. The door opened slowly. It was Sarah. Same scarf, same smile, same food, as if nothing had happened. She walked in, sat beside him and said, "Good morning." Then she began to clean his face, for true kindness knows no fear. Soon Julius's daughters spiraled out of control. His house no longer smelled of soup or sickness. It reeked of perfume and sin. Music blared from small speakers, heels clicked on the tiles, lipstick stained the walls. Men in dark glasses and thick voices came and went as if checking into a hotel. His daughters had transformed the house into a lodge. Every night strange cars parked outside, men laughed, doors banged, rooms shook. All while Julius lay still breathing, still sick, still human on the same bed. Sometimes they didn't even move him, simply pushing him to one side of the mattress to continue their kissing, moaning and laughing like ghosts. Julius would try to raise his voice. "Please," he'd whisper, eyes full of tears, but before he could finish, one of them would shout, "Shut up." One even slapped his cheek hard. "You want to die? Die fast," she snapped. "You're blocking our shine." Then she'd spray perfume into the air and climb onto the bed with her guest. Julius closed his eyes, but sleep refused to come. His heart was heavier than his body. He lay not just on a bed but on shame, on pain, on betrayal. The walls of his house, once filled with children's laughter, now echoed with sounds that shamed even the wind. Yet no one stopped them, for the man of the house had become a mat they wiped their feet on. One Sunday, something unbelievable happened, forever altering Julius's life and ensuring his daughters would regret their contempt. The sky was clear, the clouds soft, the air calm, as if something momentous was approaching. Rebecca, Julius's eldest daughter, swayed into the compound like a queen, followed by a light-skinned, tall, clean-shaven man dressed impeccably. His expensive perfume preceded him, his wristwatch sparkled. He stepped out of a shining black Lexus SUV. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. "That's a big man," someone whispered. "Manager of a real estate company," another replied. "Rebecca has hit the jackpot," a third added. They walked into the house laughing, but the moment the man stepped into the room and saw Julius lying on the mat, weak, dirty, quiet, he froze. His eyes widened. He blinked, then blinked again, then dropped to his knees flat, both hands on the floor. "Chief Julius," he cried. "Ah, sir, it's you. My God, it's really you." He looked at Julius again as if seeing a king in rags. Rebecca stood stunned, her fine wig askew, her lips parted but speechless. The other daughters rushed in, confused. "What's happening?" Kojo, the man, turned to them, his face a mixture of surprise and anger. "You mean you people live with this man like this and don't know who he is?" They blinked. Kojo slowly stood. "You don't know who this man is? This is the founder of City Pillar Estates. The man who made me who I am." The room gasped. "The company that owns over 20 estates in this country? The man that gave me my first chance, the one who handed everything to me years ago? My boss, my helper, my father." His voice broke. "He gave me the company. He said he wanted to go and build a family, a proper family, raise children the right way, away from the noise, away from money. He told me not to tell anyone. He disappeared." Kojo looked around again. "And this is how you treat him?" Silence descended, even the clock seemed to stop ticking. Julius didn't speak. He just looked at Kojo, his eyes wet, his lips trembling, but still he said nothing. Sometimes tears speak louder than words. And in that silence, truth stood tall and shame bowed its head. Kojo looked at P. Julius, then back at them. Years ago, he began, your father owned City Pillar Estates. Yes, the same company you see on billboards, TV, newspapers. Your father built it from dust with his own hands, with his own sweat. The daughter stared. Rebecca whispered, it's not possible. But Kojo continued. One day he called me to his office. He gave me the papers. He said, Kojo, take this company, manage it. I want to leave everything. I want to raise a family in peace. I want my children to grow up with values, not with pride. Kojo's voice dropped low. He said, if I stay here, women will love me for my money. I don't want to raise spoiled children. I want to build my home in quiet. Let them grow and find their way. When they're ready, they'll find me. He looked at their shocked faces. So he disappeared, hid his name, hid his riches, hid even from his own blood. He paused, then said, slow and clear, this man owns half of the luxury houses in this region. The room spun. Rebecca's knees buckled, she dropped to the floor. Daddy, she choked, her voice like broken glass, lips trembling, eyes filling with tears. The other daughters stood frozen like trees under a heavy storm. And P. Julius? He didn't move. He just looked at them, his face calm, but his eyes were rivers. For the first time, his daughters saw not a sick man, but a king who wore silence like a crown. By morning, Asajira was no longer quiet. Mouths moved like drums, feet rushed like wind. The fool is a billionaire, they shouted in the market. P. Julius, the man who never went to school, the one with urine on his mat. Whispers turned into shouts, shouts into stories. Everyone wanted to see him. Some came to kneel, some to cry, some just to gaze upon his face and say, ah, so this is the man. P. Julius, the one they mocked, the one they ignored, he was the one behind the gates and towers and mighty estates they had admired for years. And now truth had broken like thunder in the sky. But while the town shook with news, something else was shaking in P. Julius's body. The sickness that began as a mere pretense, a quiet test of love, had grown real teeth. The doctors checked him again. One removed his glasses, looked at Kojo and said softly, 6 months left. Maybe less. Kojo's heart sank. Sarah's eyes filled. P. Julius simply nodded as if he already knew. Then he asked for one thing, call them all. Who? Kojo asked. Everyone, P. Julius whispered. The town, the neighbors, the ones who helped me, the ones who hurt me. And so they came 1 by 1, 10 by 10 until the compound overflowed. The sick, the rich, the poor, the proud, the humble, the laughing ones, the crying ones. Everyone stood, waiting to hear what the forgotten man had to say. The air that day was heavy like rain clouds full of fire. The compound was packed. Mothers held their children, fathers folded their arms, elders stroked their beards. Even the breeze stood still to listen. In the center sat P. Julius, thin as a broomstick, his bones wrapped in old cloth, his hands resting on the arms of a quiet wheelchair. Kojo stood beside him, Sarah too. P. Julius's lips moved. At first his voice was soft like wind through dry leaves, but then it grew clear, sharp, full of truth. I was looking for love, he said, and everyone leaned in. But I saw shame. I saw greed. I saw wickedness. His eyes scanned the crowd. His daughters looked down, his wives held their wrappers tight. The people went quiet. P. Julius pointed to the crowd. When I could no longer stand, you left me. When I could no longer talk, you ignored me. When I was smelling like death, only a few remembered I was still breathing. He turned his head to the side. But the ones who helped me, the ones who brought 1 spoon of food, 1 cup of water, those are the ones who will carry my name. Gasps, whispers, tears. I will give my wealth, he continued, to those who showed me heart. Then he called names. One neighbor received a house, another land, another money for his child's school. People began to cry real tears. But then he turned to Sarah, the one who never stopped coming, who wiped his sores, who smiled through pain. Sarah, he said. She looked up, eyes brimming with water. From today, you are the CEO of City Pillar Estates. The crowd erupted. Some clapped, some fell to their knees, some shouted, some simply wept. Sarah stood still, her hands shaking, her heart beating like a talking drum. But P. Julius smiled, and in that smile, all of Asajira saw what real wealth looked like. Kojo stood beside him, Sarah sat near, feeding him small spoons of pap. P. Julius looked at them, a soft smile gracing his lips. Then he turned to Kojo and said, "If she agrees, marry her." Kojo bowed his head deeply. "Yes, sir," he said. Sarah looked at P. Julius, her eyes shy but her smile warm like a sunrise. Months passed. The wedding was small but radiant. Neighbors danced, old women clapped. Even the wind seemed to blow gently that day, offering its blessing. Sarah and Kojo became husband and wife, and together, they ran city pillar estates with quiet hands and open hearts. Then one morning just before dawn, P. Julius closed his eyes. He didn't shake, he didn't cry. He simply slept and never woke up, peaceful, soft like a candle finishing its light, not in darkness but in grace. All of Asagira mourned. The same people who once mocked him now wore white and wept like babies. They sang for him, spoke of him, told his story to their children. Far away in the grand city of Lagos, at the gate of City Pillar headquarters, a golden plaque was placed. It carried his final truth. Respect is the foundation. Not wealth. Not education. Just heart. And with that, P. Julius, whom the world had called a fool, became a legend.